What he says in there is that every time you open the book, you get immersed in it a little bit more until it becomes your reality. And I felt like as I was writing this, there was little moments that came up the whole time that made it more clear and more intimate to my understanding, especially as I go through the Ayurveda teachings. So one of the pieces that didn't mean anything before was all the energy stuff, all about the gunas. It was kind of like, but now with the Ayurveda piece mixed in, how do you find balance between rajas and tamas? Why does that matter? How does that impact every decision you make in your life? And how can we come back to that again and again to purify and cleanse and refine what we want our life to look like?
And this is all just quintessential purpose behind self-study, right? These texts that we learned, and then we go back through and explore them and bring them into, well, how is this relatable now? What does this actually mean? How do I embody it? And because we talk about it and we repeat it and we read it and we write about it, it's landing at a whole deeper level.
Every time.
Yeah.
Yoga philosopher Georg Feuerstein says that yoga is the process of sattvification. So that basically as we do yoga, we approach sattva, which is that balanced part of the gunas. And so rather than feeling like we need to get rid of the gunas in that more classical approach, a non-dual approach says we can embrace them as a tool to help us find harmony. That inner harmony then leads us to samadhi, leads us to yoga as a state of being rather than a practice that we do.
You know what that makes me think of is the interesting parallels to what modern neuroscience is showing. And even sattva is something when I've looked at the spectrum of rajas, tamas, and sattva, I've thought that sattva is kind of like the social engagement system of the nervous system. It's the inclusion of these other states, but it also transcends and emerges into something different. Different than classical of separate to transcend. It's still a tantric philosophy of include to transcend. So we're including each stage of the process and how that brings us into a whole different experience of what samadhi is. It's including the body. We're still grounded and embodied as we're experiencing bliss. But I like the parallels we can make with the nervous system and these different systematic ideologies through yogic history.
Yoga is meant to be a lifestyle. It's not meant to just be what we do on our mat or do on our cushion. It's meant to be with us. The union of our whole being with consciousness is meant to be with us all the time. We are not separate from that, only in the way that we think and the way that we allow the veils of Maya, illusion, to get in the way of us knowing that reality, because we are meant to be one with the universe as we are always, but have forgotten.
Yeah. And that's something that I'm bringing into module 2, part 2, when we talk more about the difference between classical and pre-classical. And what I'm bringing in is that this tantric philosophy is also very similar to, again, somewhat of a new way of looking at the body in terms of the myofascial system and how traditionally it's been breaking down the body with anatomy systems and parts. And now we've gotten back to this place of recognizing, again, we need to differentiate to understand these different systems. But if we don't come back into wholeness, then we're missing a huge part of what it is to be in a body and how a body works. So bringing in the wisdom of fascia and how our whole life's narrative is written in the fascia. And we can access, again, all these different states, samadhi and deep concentration and meditation, by being in our body and tracking sensation and thinking more about our body as one unit versus these different parts. And one of my favorite ways to think about the body is that, and this comes from Internal Family Systems, Dick Schwartz says that we're more than, well, it's not just him, but in this reference it is that we're greater than the sum of our parts, whether it's the parts of our body or the parts of our psyche. These little parts, these little young ones still inside of us, that we want to turn towards them and include them, and then recognize, but we're also greater than the sum of these parts.
In a related way, in Swami Satchitananda's translation of the Yoga Sutras, he expands quite a bit on the metaphor of a car. And that a car is made up of component parts. One of those component parts is a wheel. Is a wheel a car? No. A wheel is a wheel, but it only becomes a car when it gets assembled with other parts. And then it takes on the nature of a car. But until then, a wheel is a wheel. And so, I mean, and in terms of the anatomy that you're talking about, the basic anatomy, the classical way to study anatomy, as you say, is to separate. This is a muscle, this is a tendon, this is a ligament. They are not a body. They are not a person. They are parts. And so, yeah, that just reminded me of, you know, what I just recently read in his translation as relating, you know, very mechanistically, but it's an easy metaphor to translate over into this idea that we are united. And that when we separate out, we lose the essence of who we are. And classical yoga is telling us to do just that, is to separate out, take the wheels off.
You're better than those wheels.
Pardon me?
You're better than those wheels.
And Tantra is saying, you're not you without your wheels. Your car is not a car without its wheels. So I like that approach as well.
And just because I've been studying so much, I like that approach as it applies to Ayurveda too, and applies to health actually, and wellness, is that we can't separate out this symptom or that feeling or this ache or pain from the whole. We have to address it as part of everything else.
And that's what yoga is all about, is connection. Right? It's union.